So ultimately, Ninja Van addressed a real need, right? I think that's a really important thing for startups and for entrepreneurs to recognize, right? You can't solve problems that don't exist, and people won't value solutions that don't solve a problem.
Welcome to Hustle Share, the podcast that features the daily grinds of unique hustlers around the world to show not our differences, but that our hustles are very much alike. Now here's your host, Ronster Bait-Yong.
Welcome to episode 37 of the Hustle Share podcast. My name is Ronster, and I'm your host. And this episode is brought to you by Payroll Hero, a time, attendance, scheduling, HR, and payroll solution for Philippine companies. If you're new to the show, you just came right on time because it is our season finale for season 1. And prior to this episode, there are 36 other episodes that literally outline what this podcast is all about. And it's all about sharing the hustle of startup founders, startup people, and excellent individuals in their own craft. And today we're celebrating a big milestone because we're finally ending season 1 after 37 episodes and a lot and hours of stories and learnings. But before we start, I'd like to give you a heads up again that this episode contains adult language, so make sure there are no kids around because we're about to end the season with a bang. Because today we'll be talking to Martin Koo, the country head of Ninja Van, to talk about the hustle behind running Ninja Van here in the Philippines. And be prepared to take notes because this is a jam-packed episode. I made sure that we're going to give you a really good one before we end this season. Because Martin's going to share a ton of learnings that a lot of you guys can learn from. But before that, we'll take a step back on how he started out his career being the son of Ernest Koo, the president of Globe, and how he did not use that card to carve out a niche in the career on his own. First, by interning at Globe, even though his father technically runs that company, he had to earn his stripes. Second, after he went to Zalora and became a media buyer doing something that he did not do in Globe as a marketing guy, and how he climbed up the ranks to become the marketing director, the head of marketing in Zalora when he left. After that, he also shared the transformation that he had to go through being a creative and how he pivoted to being a marketer and ultimately someone who can run a business from the ground up. Next, he will also share how he used all of those learnings to run Hook when he jumped ship, and then ultimately how he jumped ship and entered the van by joining Ninja Van as its country head. And this is where it gets interesting because he's going to do a deep dive of how he does his marketing, the type of metrics and tools he uses, all the way through telling us the story of the early struggles and challenges his whole team had to go through to put Ninja Van where it is now. And lastly, he's going to share with us a ton of advice that all of you hustlers can apply in your own hustle as we end this first season. So if you're ready to learn the hustle behind running Ninja Van, let's begin this episode right now. Welcome to the latest episode of the Hustle Share podcast. As promised in the last few episodes, we're going to have a bang for our season finale. And today, I'm going to live up to that because today we have someone really special in the episode to share his hustle with us. And I suggest you really tune in very carefully because this is going to be a special episode because today we're going to be talking to the country head. Is that correct? Country head, right?
Country head.
All right. Of Ninja Van, Mr. Martin Koo. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ron. I hope I can live up to that intro.
Oh, dude. This is going to be very interesting because I know you've been through a lot. You've hustled through a lot. And you've done so much in just short amount of time. And we've met before. We were both doing something different now. And I've been reading about you and what you've been doing, and I'm very impressed with your hustle. But as we usually do, Martin, what's your hustle?
So, as the country head of Ninja Van, I've been responsible for the launch of the business in this market. I was hired out of Singapore to set up the company in the Philippines. So, I was first boots on ground. I've been doing this for just over 3 years now. My third year anniversary was a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, shoot! Congrats.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And I've been fortunate enough to see the business grow from zero to more than 8,000 delivery personnel across the country. So
Wow.
the scale is really getting there, and it's becoming a really, really exciting business.
Yeah.
As far as my role in the business and kind of what my hustle is, it's really evolved, I would say, from being that kind of launch guy, being the guy that has to kind of do everything and cover a little bit of everything, to being somebody who can kind of step back and really manage a management team that's doing an amazing job of building this business across the Philippines.
And I would say the way you scaled this up, it really lives up to your name. It's like a ninja. You just creeped in the night, and then boom, 8,000. Holy shit, that's big. And especially in the logistics game here in the Philippines, in the region, this is the key now, because a lot of what e-commerce, especially the backbone of e-commerce in the whole region, at least here in the Philippines too, won't happen without logistics. But let's take a step back, Martin, real quick. I just want to understand, because you have a very interesting background. You're still young. How old are you now? Like
30. I'm 30.
30, bro. I'm older than you. Holy shit. But you've done so much, absolutely. But I want to step back and ride the hustle share time machine that we call it.
Sure.
And how you started doing hustle, or your earliest account of hustling, considering that, again, let's just call a spade a spade. We all know it, and for those people who don't know it, Martin is the son of Mr. Ernest Cudo. So he's like in our Mount Rushmore of executives. Like, holy shit, it's Ernest, right? When I bump into, like, holy crap, my knees shake, like, holy shit, this guy is no, because in terms of execution, right? He's very I've had Minette Navarrete on the show where he spoke highly of Ernest and whatnot. But how is it growing up for you, and how did you have that hustle gene in you?
Yeah, I think the experience I had growing up around my dad certainly wasn't the experience I think most people think, where I was being mentored at somebody's knee and I was being primed for this moment for my entire life. Right. I think the reality is I wasn't a great son for the majority of my young life, at least not in terms of living up to my dad's expectations on the business front. I really wanted to go through a variety of different careers growing up. I started out with Egyptologist when I was like 6. I went through I went through lawyer in the middle teenagers. And finally I landed on comic book writer somewhere when I was like in the late teens, right? So I went through college and high school really thinking I was going to try to be a writer and really focusing on that. I studied English when I was in undergrad, and kind of the entire time I was finding ways to stay connected to that.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, my dad also really pushed me hard in terms of staying in touch with business and trying to expose me to different aspects of business. So he connected me with different consulting opportunities, with banking opportunities, just to give me that kind of exposure. And frankly, I hated it. I hated every minute of it. And it really wasn't until after college that I realized that, one, no one was going to pay me to write, so that was a big thing. And then I realizing having to get paid. The bigger thing, in fact, was actually interning for my dad at Globe. And so after school, once I interned at Globe, not directly with my dad, but rather with their mobile data team. So this is still back in BlackBerry day, man.
So BBM. Rest in peace. It's officially dead.
But it's a really interesting product, and I think the way that product evolved is super unique. So BlackBerry was always this kind of walled garden, right? Where you could kind of dichotomize the internet and sell it to people in chunks. And that's the perfect way to package internet services here in the Philippines, where people don't fully understand, at least at the broad market yet, as far as what the capability is, what the potential is, and why should you pay for this.
Just a glimpse, basically, of what it was now.
Exactly. So, working with mobile data, and selling these data plans ultimately kind of brought me to marketing, which was my first love on the business side.
That's the pivotal point for you.
Exactly.
But did you ever experience, I'm pretty sure, because I've seen this, my mom is working with the Ayala Group as well. But she worked for 17 years in Ayala Foundation. So everything she thinks is Ayala. Like, oh, that's Ayala, anak. Oh, that's Ayala. It's like, okay, I get it, Mom. Thank you. Right. So my playground growing up was Ayala Museum. Fuck's sake. Almost broke a few dioramas there. Thank God I didn't. All right. But I saw, she always talks about this, that, the children of the Zobels will always intern somewhere and they didn't get a hall pass. They didn't get special treatment. Was it the same for you when you interned at Globe?
I mean, I think very much so, and I would say up to even to today. You know,
Yeah.
my dad's a big believer in meritocracy. I think that he's built that in the global organization. It's something I really, I'm proud of for within him.
Absolutely.
It's something
Yeah.
I try to emulate here at NinjaVan. Ultimately, he threw me into a tough team with a tough, fantastic manager.
Nice.
And I loved working for Joanna Africa at the time.
Yeah.
She was a fantastic manager. And she really, in terms of where I cut my stripes, it's really there. She didn't no free passes. Everything was earned.
Yeah.
And she helped me find things to love about marketing.
Right. And what were those roles? So you said marketing, coming from writing now to marketing. What was those your trial by fire moments that you're like, all right, I'll shove you in here. I don't care who you are. Well, what are those things like, all right, this is the hustle now.
Yeah. So I think working with the mobile data team or MDS over at Globe was really a kind of a foundational experience for me, right? Both in terms of understanding tech and understanding digital products and what consumers like and appreciate about them. But equally importantly, I think, was how I studied performance in this space, right?
Performance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So ultimately, although I wasn't as much of a quant guy coming into my career, I really fell in love with the numbers, right? So there's this kind of cause and effect with telco plans, right? Where when you put them out, the next day in real time, we could monitor take up, right? We could monitor transactions. And ultimately, that's a direct measure of the effectiveness of your marketing efforts.
Absolutely.
So I found a way to kind of reconcile the English background and the writing component with this, or the creative aspect with this, because it's very similar to me. It's the manipulation of language, of communication to influence how people think, perceive products, or perceive a storyline about your product. And ultimately, that's what drives believability and brand credibility.
Got it. What do you think, or like, if looking back, what were those like your marquee? It's like, all right, I did this shit. I was an intern, and there was the fruit of all my hard work in Globe. And that's like that you remember.
So the very first campaign I worked on was for a product called BB Max, and this was the first BlackBerry plan that I think didn't have like an internet restriction. It was like only data on BlackBerry.
Shoot,
right?
Wow.
So,
Wow.
I wasn't really involved in like the production component of like the marketing, but I remember sitting there with the team and poring over newspaper copy at like 2 a.m. trying to figure out what we were gonna.
This is in the old Pioneer office.
In the old Pioneer
the
office.
rat infested one.
The rat infested. Pioneer Highlands office.
Shredder is the gang leader on that one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But yeah, I remember we worked so damn hard on this thing. We really picked about language, which image of the models we're going to use, all this stuff, and it was that kind of minutia, right? Of like all these little intricacies and how that can potentially play a role in terms of how he perceives the product, right?
That is awesome.
And the next day when the paper ran, we see the ad. I was so proud, right?
Nice.
And, I clipped the thing. And then I'm checking the numbers constantly, refreshing as frequently as I can.
Wow.
And of course, nothing. Take up was marginal. Uplift was marginal.
Right.
But that kind of created this obsession within me around the campaign to find ways to kind of modulate, improve, and try to fix it. Right. Find out what was broken about it. Okay. And that's really what I carried forward into my digital marketing background. Right. Digital marketing is more the same. It's cause and effect, right? You put an ad out, you see what happens. You have even more granularity in terms of where drop-off is taking place. So you can get very, very technical and very, very quantitative as far as how you're managing performance.
Absolutely. Now, what was that point where you're at? After Globe, that's where you have to step out.
Yeah.
Was that a scary thing? Because now you have to step out, and you ended up. This is where I met you.
Yeah.
In Zalora.
That's right.
Right. How did you get the Zalora opportunity, and what was it like when you took it up?
So Globe was never really a long-term option for me, right? And Ernest made that clear to me as well from day one, right? There's no career for you.
There's no
here.
son for me.
Exactly.
You don't have a son pass here.
And this isn't a family business.
Correct.
Right?
You can't inherit it.
Exactly. He said, I just work here, right?
Right.
So I never had any misconceptions about whether or not I was going to build a career at Globe.
Okay.
I was really fortunate that a team of consultants walked in the door about halfway through my internship.
Okay.
A team of really smart BCG guys go by the name of Brian Koo and Paulo Campos.
There you go. And by the way, a shout out to Brian Koo for recommending. I was asking Brian, I need someone for my finale. He's like, I know a guy. He's just right there. He pointed at the office like, where's it? That's our old Groupon office before. It's like, oh yeah, it's Martin. Oh shoot, yes, Martin. I know Martin. It's like, yeah. So thank you, Brian, for hooking us up.
Right.
So we met Brian, a couple of more guys. So Paulo, was it?
Paulo Campos, who also went on to partner with Brian to start Zalora.
Right.
So, ultimately found great friendship with these guys.
Okay.
Had met them a little bit when I interned at BCG before that.
Got it.
And, reuniting with them at Globe and working with them at Globe was
Okay.
also a really kind of compelling experience, right? And being able to work closely with these really smart people with a very different perspective on mobile data,
Okay.
that added a lot, I think, in terms of opening my worldview.
Yeah.
So when Brian and Paolo were approached to start Zalora together,
Right.
They tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, there's something going on here. Do you want to come check it out?"
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I was still being kind of aimless and
Right.
being the snot-nosed college kid I was.
Right. And you weren't into fashion, were you?
I wasn't, but
Okay.
the hook for them was they knew I was really into sneakers,
Right.
And they said, "Hey, do you want to come do sneaker buying for us?" I was
Oh
like,
shoot!
that
Yes,
sounds
checks over stripes
amazing.
all
Yeah,
day.
exactly.
I'm a Nike guy, so I love my Air Maxes. Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I've been I was really excited about the opportunity of being able
Right.
to work with the brands, and I thought it was going to be really cool and really
Oh,
sexy.
dude, yes. And in your 20s, this is like the sexiest
For
thing you can
sure,
do.
for sure.
Right, and there
Yeah.
was a lot of hot girls too in that office. I
For sure,
remember.
yeah. So there was a lot of fringe benefits working
Yes.
at Zalora. But ultimately, what I realized was, I hated buying. Buying wasn't for me. I wasn't good at it. I didn't understand it. I don't have particularly good fashion sense.
Okay.
So I wasn't adding much on that level.
Okay.
And I think that this is kind of where the hustle component comes back in.
Right.
But, I was scrambling to stay in the company, but at
Got
the
it.
same time, I didn't want to stay in the job I was in. So I would work a whole day upstairs with the buying team, and then
Okay.
I'd go down and I'd tap Paul on the shoulder and say, "Hey, is there anything I can do for the marketing guys?"
Ah.
And after a while, I felt like I had contributed enough to ask for a transfer, and Pal was kind enough to accommodate me.
And that's the beauty about startups, right? Because in a normal corporate setup, good luck trying to get that.
For sure.
Right? And what was like now? So what's the difference being in a globe environment where, though it's very, very, forward thinking and fast paced still, but in a startup, what's the difference now in cultures and how you did that and how you're able to now be part of marketing?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference for me is the amount of impact that any one person can make.
Amen.
Right.
Yes. Even an intern is
100%,
pivotal.
100%.
Right.
So, I think based on my corporate experience as well, internships that I did, your main job is not to screw up, right?
Yeah.
As long as you don't screw up, rather, the company's going to continue to draw revenue.
Correct.
Maybe it doesn't grow
Right.
in a huge way, but it also won't lose, a massive amount of market
Yes.
share, amount of money.
Right.
And that's all that people really care about, right? I think my dad tells this to me best sometimes.
Right.
When he explained this to me, he said,
Right.
"What people in corporate are really good at are not getting fired."
Yes.
Right. And in startups, I think you can't have that mentality, right? Because your survival is not certain, and if you don't make big moves, the possibility of coming into the office next day and the lights not turning on are pretty high.
Yeah.
Right. So you're playing for survival. You're playing to win, right? You're playing to change the market.
And you're swinging big, right? You
Yeah.
know, you're not just like, all right, let's take a nice curveball. No,
Right.
you're going for the fences on this one.
Totally.
Every single time.
Totally.
And majority of the time, you're gonna miss.
Absolutely. Yeah.
True. But now, when you were in marketing, how was that like? Because when I met you back then, we were trying to do, and you were very aggressive.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked about what you're doing. And what are those things that you remember that were really key on doing the Zalora opportunity that you did, and how you were able to grow in that role?
Yeah. So, I think Rocket doesn't have the best reputation anymore as far as startups, right?
Yeah.
But culturally, it may have been a little bit toxic.
Right.
But I think more importantly,
You'll grow in that shit,
Yeah.
I swear.
Yeah, and it's a tough environment, right? Hard, high pressure environments.
Right.
Really push people to perform.
Yep.
And I think it unfortunately does separate the weak from the strong, right? So the attrition rate's phenomenally high, the burnout rate's phenomenally high, but I think the folks that make it through the other end are rock stars. They're carved out of stone, right?
Right.
So I really loved that part about the experience. It was tough. There were days I came to the office and felt like crying. I was exhausted. But at the same time, there were days where, the rewards are so material and what you've accomplished is so material, right?
Right.
So for me, that was probably the largest stage of personal growth that I've had throughout my career.
Yeah.
Even including this experience at Ninja Van, as enriching as it's been. but transforming myself from that, again, creative type or somebody who was trying to be a writer before this into somebody who was really trying to make a business work was a big mental shift for me.
Absolutely. Now, all right, let's take a break and let's talk about your next step now. How you're able to jump from being the guy in Zalora in marketing and whatnot, and how you got to this ninja van and how you got into the van. This sounds very pornographic, but it's not. But again, I'll see you guys. Let's go and then I'll talk about that in the break. Hey, hustlers. Let's talk about something really important real quick. Something that a lot of you I know can relate to, especially if you're running a business. And I'm talking about payroll. You know how hard it is and time consuming this is, especially that you have to do it twice a month. And as a guy who's been running tech startups for over 10 years now, this is something that I did not enjoy doing at all. It's not like it's because I don't like paying my employees. No, but it's already hard looking for funding to fund for your payroll, and then it's so much more harder if you're doing this manually. Luckily, I found something that I highly recommend that you try, and it's from our friends from Payroll Hero. And here's how Payroll Hero works. They use your employee's face as your primary biometric to avoid buddy punching and ghost employees. So unless your team can figure out a way to swap each other's faces, tracking time and performance will never be your problem again. Payroll Hero is also very consumer friendly because it's also based on web and mobile, and it's also cloud-based, so you never have to worry about your clunky old biometric machines. So now you can automate time, attendance, scheduling, HRIS, and a payroll platform wrapped all in one. We have a very special bonus for you hustlers listening on the Hustle Share podcast. All you need to do is go to www.payrollhero.ph and use the promo code HustleShare to get a 60-day free trial. That's technically 4 payrolls that you can do all for free, so you can see how it works for you. And the beauty about it is there's no upfront payment needed to do this. So never worry about payroll again. With Payroll Hero, optimizing work productivity with happiness. And we're back from the break. We're still with Martin Koo of Ninja Van. But before Ninja Van, Martin, you did something else after Zalora.
Yep.
What was the turning point? It's like, all right, was it the culture of it? Again, you said there was a dog-eat-dog environment in Zalora. You said you needed a change. How did you jump from Zalora to what you did next?
Sure. So, I think when you're in a startup environment, right, especially if you're coming in a little bit later in the game, it's always hard to, I think, recover the value, right? Because you're compromising a lot. You're compromising salary, you're compromising quality of life, right? And then ultimately, you're doing that in favor of playing the startup lottery, right? And it really amounts to the amount of skin in the game that you have.
Right.
So essentially, the position I reached at Zalora was I arrived at a managerial position, a quite senior managerial position within the company.
Got it.
But I had kind of worked my way through the organization. So as a result, the equity and things like that I was getting were being assigned later in my career. And I was at a crossroads where I had to decide, hey, do I want to do this for another 4 years and invest points or what, or do I want to try something else? And ultimately, the hook opportunity happened to find me right in the middle of this decision.
Right.
Zalora was an amazing business, and still is, and it was an amazing team.
Dude.
But the challenge for me was the scope wasn't going to evolve much, right? Even if the company's going to grow a lot in terms of what is really within country scope, wouldn't change, right? And one of those things that I really wanted to get more exposure to was performance digital marketing, right? So paid media. CRM, website management, that was mostly the local discipline, partnerships, BD. But performance media was always centralized out of Singapore. And that was always something I wanted more contact with.
Okay.
So Peter Bithos, who's the incredible CEO of Hook, was reached out to me. We had worked together a little bit during my internship at Globe. And he knew I was working on marketing out of Philippines, and he was looking for somebody to head his acquisition team.
Got it.
So coming into Hook was a really cool opportunity. Really incredible company, really cool product.
Absolutely.
Right? It's probably the product that I feel most personally connected to.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's movies and TV, right?
Absolutely.
So what's better than that? And
that was a very tough market to be in.
It
because
is, yeah.
There's so much competition, especially now. Netflix, iFlix, name it, whatever. Even the other networks are doing their own shit now.
for sure.
Right? And how did you blossom in that opportunity? And again, by this time, you're not a juvenile anymore.
Yeah.
You've had your own game in terms
Yeah.
of marketing. But I'll ask you first. At this point, what was your go-to strategy when let's talk a deep dive about your marketing, your marketing playbook now.
Sure.
And that's what it is. When you do something now as marketing, what are the first things that you look for and what's the outcome that you want to do? And those things you do in between.
Sure. So I want to talk about a campaign I did at Zalora that kind of illustrates or a key lesson that I was taught, right?
Okay.
The game in Zalora was always customer acquisition cost, right?
Right.
How efficient can I spend each dollar to acquire a customer?
Yeah,
right?
CACs.
CACs.
Right.
And the traditional view of this was from performance media, right? I would spend X many dollars on digital ads to bring X many customers in.
Okay.
So where I started marketing was in the partnerships team, BD.
Right.
And the goal was, can we beat digital CAC, right? At the time, the share, customer contribution share of this was like 0.1%. It was totally marginal.
Right.
And when we started the team, we were running around going to restaurants, cafes, handing out vouchers and flyers, right?
So promo codes, whatever those are. Right.
Yeah, a different kind and less efficient kind of hustle, I would say.
Right.
And after doing this for a while, I started thinking hey, what are we doing wrong here that this is not happening, right?
Yeah.
Because every unit that you dispatch has a cost. The cost of your time is expensive. And I started thinking about, how do I find partners that have similar interests or that I can align our goals together, right? And ultimately, the area we landed on was the banks, right? So banks wanted their credit card holders to spend more. And more specifically, they wanted these credit card holders to spend online, right?
Right.
So there's naturally this kind of synergistic objective, right? And then when you pair that with the distribution leverage that the bank has, and the very appealing use case that Zalora, is as the top fashion
that's
site in the country,
Correct.
Yeah, it comes together. So the next evolution of this was, let's work with the banks, right? And then it started with very simple stuff: use your credit card on Zalora and get X% off, right? And we would find that the customer return was interesting, but not. It was also kind of offset by revenue degradation, right? Because your existing loyal customers were also able to avail of these kinds of discounts, right? So the question became, okay, now how can I qualify the customer? How can I be smarter about how we distribute discounts, right? And we landed on a campaign that we wound up calling Golden Ticket, right?
Golden Ticket.
So this basically was like looping in the same kind of discount distribution mechanism alongside gamification, ideas in marketing.
Rewards, whatever, right.
So, we didn't have a lot of money in Zalora. I couldn't say that, everybody gets a massive prize.
Got it.
But I could scrape together enough budget for, say, like a 50,000 peso shopping spree, right? Which is still pretty attractive, right? It's a lot of stuff on Zalora. It's a lot of Nikes. And
thank you. Right.
And so, but what we found is that even though we didn't change or modulate the discount amount, the gamification aspect of how the discounts are being distributed increased the level of engagement and the level of perceived value around the discount, right? So the fact that if I come over to you and I say, hey, Ron, here's 20% off your next buy, you're like, okay, great. But if I say, hey, Ron, you just won 20% off, suddenly, that kind of tone, that perception changes, right? Of like, wow,
that's where the writing background, I guess, comes in, because those words, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Sure, yeah, for sure. And then the presentation became a big deal. We found ways to reskin this back end that we built. Ultimately, it was the same kind of random number generator in the back that was determining what prize you get. But ultimately, the front end would change. We'd have a slot machine. We'd have a spinning wheel. We'd have like a hidden picture game, right? So we really played around with what kind of themes were very interesting for our customers, what kind of games were fun for them to play, and what would keep our banking partners interested and excited about these different promotions.
Exactly, but there's also always that one thing on the side that no matter how good the campaign is, it always has a lifespan.
Sure.
Right. And how do you know it's time to move on? And like for example, okay, that works. Like for us in Party Foul, I remember like one thing I did well was working with Globe as well. Right. And in Party Foul before, there was a big event that's called I forgot the raid, but it was a raid. And it was Unleash. Unleash was the name.
Okay.
And the only way you can get into the event, and this is the right time when we launched Party Foul, it was through our app. We give globe the exposure and whatnot through the app and for whatever they were doing. But the only way you can get in is through my app.
Yep.
And now from 0 to 20,000 in 1 week downloads. We had real zero marketing budget. We didn't even have funding. It worked. But we couldn't play that game for a long time. It only has a short window of opportunity. For you, when do you know it's time to move on, and how do you replicate that success to another campaign?
Sure. So I think fatigue is a huge problem, right? And when you keep communicating the same audience, you will see diminishing returns with time.
True.
Right? And that's what I really love about digital marketing, right? Is one, you can control the number of exposures that you get to any particular user or impression.
Right.
You can qualify, who you're distributing to, so that gives you a lot more control. But to address the question, I think more directly, I think it really comes down to the measurables, right? And when you're working with tech, that's really your competitive advantage is better transparency, better visibility in terms of what's happening with your business. That's something that we often apply here at NinjaVan in terms of just having better transparency across our entire network, and then that allowing us to make smarter and better decisions about how we handle parcels. In a marketing environment, it's very similar, right? You'll know what the quality of each impression is based on the engagement factors that show on your website or in the app or in the promotion that you're running. It can be as simple as just understanding what your conversion rates are, right?
Got it.
So if every time you do a campaign,
metrics.
Yeah, metrics. Right.
Got it. But is there a tool that you like using more than anything? I mean, there's a lot of CRMs. You can name it, whatever, right? But that made you, the rock star marketer or whatever, the head that you are. Because at the end of the day, if the metrics are always there.
Yeah.
But if you're not funneling them the right way and you're not able to make the right decisions in a fast manner where you can execute a campaign, it's whatever data, like it's shit, right? But for you, is there a tool that you like to use a lot and whatnot that works for you a lot?
It's going to sound really vanilla, but Google Analytics,
there you go.
GA is a fantastic tool. I think the Facebook suite of business tools is also fantastic.
Dude, right. And they keep improving it too. Oh my God. Right.
There's a reason these are the two best ad platforms in the world, right? And people always try to get fancy, I think, with other ad tech. There's a lot of cheap ad tech that people will try to sell you that, they'll try to convince you it adds a ton of value or it's smarter or that our inventory is cheaper. But the reality is you have to go where the user leverage is, right? And digital marketing is empowered by the richness within which you can profile any given customer or any given impression, right? And I believe that Google and Facebook do a better job of profiling these customers because of the level and quality of interactions happening on those platforms.
Correct.
Right? Google with the richness on search and content consumption, Facebook with their richness in terms of social and interest-based consumption. So I think they're both really fascinating platforms, extremely powerful. I think unless you're a huge organization, you almost don't need to look much further than that. Right?
Absolutely.
You should be able to find a lot of value in these two core platforms.
Absolutely. Now, okay, let's talk about Hook real quick. And what did you do there, and how did you jump to being country head now of the ninjas with their vans? Right? So, how did the Hook? What are the things that you did in Hook? Now, the stuff that you just said now is just like, mind blowing. I've never had that in the podcast. Very, very cool. But with knowing that now, what are those things that you instantly now execute on Hook, and then on the way to NinjaVan?
So I was very much a digital marketing guy at Hook, right? And I was able to go quite hardcore in terms of my digital focus, right? So I wasn't doing partnerships. I wasn't doing BD work anymore. It was really just how can we win customers in this digital channel?
Funnel game, the top of the funnel.
Yeah, exactly. And I think infrastructure was key. The platform at the time wasn't built to really administer digital marketing in a big way. So getting that set up was one of the big challenges. And I think one of the really interesting aspects of this was how this product is structured, right? Because the quality of a conversion isn't determined until after this kind of 30-day trial, right? So when you sign up on Netflix or whatever, you get the first 30 days free.
Freemium, the freemium model, right?
The worst kind of customer is the customer that signs up, watches 10 hours of content a day, and then drops off on the 30th day, right? Because all cost. You paid for marketing, you paid for content delivery, you paid for the content he's watching, and you get nothing back, right?
Like you went to a marriage and they divorced you after 30 days.
Yeah, exactly. After spending all your money.
Exactly.
So it was a really interesting challenge to try to understand, how can we qualify these customers better? How do we go a little bit deeper in terms of our customer segmentation? What are potential signals that this is a sharky customer, if you will, that's unlikely
and
to
then
pay?
incentivize those ones that will convert.
Right.
Right.
So ultimately, your feedback loop is, hey, if this is converting at an efficient clip, I want to spend more money on it, right? But when you don't get that true conversion signal until 30 days later, how do you link back, right?
It's a Hail Mary, right?
Yeah,
at
it's
that
tough.
time.
It's tough.
Right.
It's a really tough marketing challenge. And to see how these guys have attacked that challenge, even since I've left, has been really interesting, really compelling.
Nice.
How they've distributed the product, the successes they've had across geographies is really compelling as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think I spent about a year with that team to kind of cover the transition as well.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough to connect with the Ninja Van leadership team. So a former colleague at Hook was kind enough to connect me with our CEO here at Ninja Van.
Nice.
Amazing entrepreneur named Chung-Wen Lai.
Right.
Chung-Wen actually started in fashion e-com too, which was
was
funny.
it? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So the heritage behind Ninja Van is really kind of an interesting story.
Okay.
They were doing a custom menswear business online.
Oh.
So the idea is you enter your dimensions.
Right.
They have manufacturing out in China. They would produce custom suits in a very fast turnaround.
Right.
And then ship it directly to you. Right.
Wow.
The challenge though was, or what they realized the challenge was, is that maybe men don't really need that many more suits.
Correct.
But they were having a really hard time getting their stuff delivered. So eventually they start thinking more about how can we solve that problem. And they start pivoting some of this smart tech more towards building technology geared around logistics. Eventually they start doing their own deliveries. And it goes from, Chung-Wen driving, the car around himself and delivering suits to people, to the community asking him, maybe you can deliver some of our stuff, to eventually this becoming a more compelling business. Right.
Absolutely.
So ultimately, Ninja Van addressed a real need, right? I think that's a really important thing for startups and for entrepreneurs to recognize, right? You can't solve problems that don't exist, and people won't value solutions that don't solve a problem.
Absolutely.
Right? So in this way, I think it was a really kind of compelling story for me to hear. But being a marketing guy, I was, dramatically unconvinced. I took this interview as a courtesy.
Okay.
And, I wound up being really blown away by Chung-Wen, right? And just his vision for this business, his vision for this product, and ultimately the level of really empathy and understanding that he had for the plights of these SMEs and these startups that were trying to do e-commerce but were really struggling because of logistics. When I'd run a campaign at Zalora, one of the most frustrating things for me was you blow up the numbers, and then, logistics drops the ball or operations drops the ball somewhere along the way. All the
like a
best
fumble in
intentions.
football. Someone fumbled the ball.
Exactly. Right. So all of this kind of efficient digital marketing that you may have been able to generate gets wasted.
It's a leaky bucket downstairs.
If you can't convert the COD sale, right? And I can tell you definitively that the longer it takes to deliver a product, the lower the likelihood of acceptance on the COD level is.
Absolutely.
So it's a huge problem, right? The other aspect of it was, I think there was this kind of really monopolistic behavior to local logistics, right? Where there were certain territories that you couldn't cover profitably unless you were of a certain size, and you couldn't get to a certain size unless you covered certain areas, right? So it was kind of this vicious cycle of
it's like a chicken and egg sort of, right?
Yeah. So somehow all roads led back to kind of a core set of incumbents that dominated the market, and were the only people that connect these isolated parts of the Philippines to e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
And again, from a client perspective, coming from the Zalora perspective, this was always something you just have to deal with. It's facts of life, right? But as a challenger brand, can we do this differently, right? Can we find a way to solve that problem or connect that region in a way that makes sense for our business, but also is sustainable, right? So ultimately, I think the idea of what we could do with this technology and the way that this technology is designed is so interesting and unique that I really felt like, hey, there's something here, right? There's a problem that I can solve. I'm familiar with that problem, and I think I can add some value here.
Got it. But the role that you got thrust into is more than just marketing now.
For sure.
Right? And how did you, now when you came in, then was it when you came in they didn't have a presence here yet or whatnot? You built the from the ground up, was
100%.
it? Holy shoot. That's hard.
Yeah.
That's putting another startup thing and whatnot coming from the marketing hat. Now you got to talk about HR, PR, which is, by the way, one of your colleagues are here watching over if we're going to fuck something up, right? But how was that experience like? But let's take a break first and let's talk about that more after the break.
Effective automation is the best way for businesses to stay competitive. And having a chatbot for your business lets you easily automate and optimize sales, marketing, and customer service in the digital age. Chatbot PH will build, train, maintain, and market your chatbot across all messaging platforms. Our team uses the latest AI technologies to enable you to better serve customers 24/7, 365. Set a meeting with us today. Message us now at m.me/chatbotph.
And we're back for the final part of our season finale with Martin Koo, and now the country head of Ninja Van. And prior to the break, you told us you built this from the ground up.
Yeah.
What were the biggest changes or challenges you had, knowing that you're used to wearing the marketing hat? You're obsessed with numbers, obsessed with conversion, and now you got to build this whole thing from the ground up, like a startup.
Yeah.
As a country head, as the go-to guy here. What was that experience like, and what were those learnings you learned during that process?
I think first things first, setting up a business in the Philippines is not easy. Right?
Yes, holy shit.
Yeah, Ron, as you know.
Right. Oh my God, it's like a torture. It's torture, actually.
Sure.
Right.
So they make you jump through a lot of hoops, right?
Right.
And I think that in and of itself is a huge deterrent for entrepreneurs in this market. And,
Right.
And to all the entrepreneurs out there, I would encourage you guys, fight through it, right? Dig deep, because ultimately it's kind of a one-time hurdle. Once you've gone through the
Yep.
burden of incorporation and all of this stuff.
That's the first hill.
Yeah,
and
that's the
it.
first hill, right? And I guarantee if you can't get past that hill, the challenges of building your business are going to be much, much harder, right?
Exactly.
So ultimately, getting started was one of the hardest things, and not having that compass, not having a sense of direction of what do we do,
Right.
I think we came in a little bit arrogant, assuming that, hey, we're smart, we're sexy, we're tech, right? And here's stodgy old incumbent logistics.
Right.
Why wouldn't you want to work with us, right?
Got it.
And it turns out there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't want to work with the company like
Okay.
that.
And what were those? What were those? Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of logistics already who are, been there for decades.
Yeah.
Right. But for you, how did you penetrate that, going that, all right, there was a lot of, stress in terms of all right, resistance, not stress. Resistance, nope, you're the new guy. You got to have earn your stripes.
Yeah.
What were those early stuff? And then how did you build a team to battle that big hurdle?
So I think a couple of things here, right? The first thing I think is we failed a lot,
Okay.
right? And I think failure is so important to any meaningful degree of sustainable success, because it taught us a lot. It taught us a lot about our business. It taught us a lot about what we're good at, and ultimately that helped shape the product that we have today, right? So in the beginning, we were really desperate for business. So we were doing anything that we could to build our network, to try to figure things out. And one of those things was actually trying to partner with the incumbents, right? We realized that no one will ship with us if you can only pick 3 locations, right? If you can only pick Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, Metro Davao,
right? It's
more inconvenient to work with Ninja Van than it would be to just say,
correct.
These guys take it all,
right?
But when we went around and talked to the incumbents, I think whether it's because of our funding heritage or because of how we were solving the problem, they really boxed us out. So we got priced out of working with the incumbents.
Oh, wow.
And, as a result, we have to say, well, damn, now we have to go cover the whole thing.
Right.
And ultimately, that pushed me into provincial coverage, right, and pushing into rural. And we started learning more things about our tech and the strengths of our tech.
Okay.
So Ninja Van's really built on a series of asset-light apps, right? Okay. So effectively, anybody with an Android handset and a motorcycle could be a Ninja Van driver, the same way that they
just
could be
like a
ninja.
Yes, right. You're creeping, and people don't know that's you, right?
Yeah. And I guess the big difference is these guys they're on payroll, right? We're happy to hire them because we can guarantee them a full day's work, right? So it's not a crowdsourced model, but it's just very asset-light in terms of tech base.
That's nice.
So basically, we can open a station with one guy and a laptop. We can open a fleet with 3 guys with cell phones, basically, right? And ultimately, what we realized is that allows us to provide a very high level of consistency of service and integrity of experience in rural provincial.
Yes.
The other value add, we were talking about data earlier.
Right.
Everything running through these apps does 2 things. It dramatically simplifies decision making on behalf of the guys using this stuff.
Okay.
So smart, really good design allows you to basically run everything through a series of push-based instructions.
Right.
Instead of looking at a run sheet of parcels and saying, what do I do next, right? And figuring out, okay, this is my SOP at the doorstep, right? Just like any good onboarding app, when the guy goes through the experience the first time and when he delivers the parcel, it's kind of a walled garden, right? There's a very clear set of expectations, clear set of buttons to press, right? And you can't complete certain steps without fulfilling all of your obligations, right? So in that way, you have a lot of integrity in terms of the steps that are being taken within the app, right? The second piece is by having everything run through these apps and eliminating pen and paper, you have now control of data, right?
Of
So you know
course,
how
you
things-
see
yeah.
all visibility is everything, all the way to the last mile.
Right.
Right. Which is a challenge, especially in terms of logistics. I've seen so many companies even try to invest so much money because they don't have visibility on the last mile. They know their distribution channel, but the last mile is always the problem, which you now have in terms of and whatnot. Now, I want to know now, just looking at it as we're recording this, we're in your office and we were fantastic view. It's like, oh my God, I'm so jealous, but this is awesome. How did you build this team? Because Rome wasn't built in a day.
For sure.
Right? How did you build this team? What are the key hires you made to make it as stable as it is? Because the grab funding that you got and all these funding, won't happen if you have a flimsy core.
Yeah.
Right? The core is always the one that people invest in, especially in the early stages. What are those things that you did, and how did you grow this to what it is now?
Yeah. So I want to give the team a little shine here because they've done an incredible job building the business, right?
Right.
Off the back of this, Ninja Van Philippines is actually the largest market for Ninja Van around the region.
Boom.
We're one of the top performing markets across the group, and it's been a huge upswing for us over the last year and a half.
Got it.
All of that's been enabled by the strength of the execution of this team. Ultimately, I think I draw on a lot of my hiring principles from guys like Brian and Paolo, who really had me participate in this environment at Zalora.
Got it.
And that was one, very merit-driven organization.
Okay.
There wasn't a lot of stacking of external hired guns on top of people.
Yeah.
There was a lot of kind of earn your stripes, right? Yeah. And kind of show everyone why you deserve to be here.
Got it.
So ultimately, when we came into the market, we started thinking about the kind of team we wanted to build.
Okay.
My partner, Alvin, who was from the regional team, and
Got
we sat down, we were talking about it, and I said, I'm really not that keen to try to get the most experienced guy from the incumbent, right? And try to stack in all these guys with 10 years, 20 years of logistics experience.
Got it.
Because when I looked at their products, that's not how we do business. That's not how Ninja Van operates, right? So if you want someone to solve the problem fundamentally different, get someone who thinks fundamentally differently. So we started looking out for more of kind of, again, people with this kind of hustle mentality with some edge, people who are smart but potentially underutilized.
Yes, and Brian said the same thing in this episode that, he had to look for the grab DNA. People that would go out at 4 a.m., have drinks with the drivers and talk their language. For you guys, what were those that DNA that you look for, the Ninja Van? Do they have to have like ninjas? Do they have to have samurai? Do they know how to jump into walls?
Throwing star skills?
Right, exactly, or shurikens, whatever.
So, no, I think for us it came down to really problem-solving ability, just raw problem-solving ability. And a certain level of customer centricity. Got it. So, when I do interviews, I tend not to ask, so Ron, tell me about your top 3 successes or whatever, right? How you got there. I'd rather, walk you through sort of a case question. So one of the things I very commonly ask interviewees is, let's say you're starting the business over, right? You're sitting in my chair. Okay. And, what are the things that you would measure, right? What do you think is important? Because ultimately, that tells me what you think is important, right? Got it. Is it revenues, financials, right? Is it customer-related metrics, success-related metrics, right? Efficiency metrics. And ultimately, those indicators help me understand how you think, right?
And that's regardless of the position you're hiring for?
Almost regardless of the position I'm hiring for.
Wow. Wow. So really, you get to dissect the mindset of that person sitting across the table, because now you're putting them on the spot, which we will never be able to predict. Regardless of like, oh shoot, now I'm on the spot.
And I mean, the reality is, again, we're solving problems in this market that have existed for a long time and haven't been addressed. We're taking a fundamentally different approach to solving those problems. And I don't know the answer, right? So I don't know, I can't sit here and ask you to answer a question looking for a specific answer. I just want to hear what you would do, right? And many times the kind of case questions that we ask in these settings are real questions that we're working on now, right? And it's not dangerous in terms of confidentiality. It's not something that's groundbreaking in terms of the kind of problem it is, right? It could just be something as simple as, how can we be more efficient with our riders, right? How can we reduce our fraud or something like that? And it just shows you, okay, well, this is how I would think about it, or at least this is how I would do it if I was internally. And if you like that workflow, if you like that approach, this person's probably going to bring something similar to the table that you will like in a very similar problem-solving setting.
Got it. Now, Marin, I'm curious about, when you're country head of something, or you're the captain of the ship, you have to have a certain flow or a certain edge in how you do your hustle and whatnot. walk me to your daily routine, your daily grind. What do you do first? What do you like, focus on? How do you manage a team? How do you make sure every single nuts and bolts are moving in the right direction?
I hate to keep parroting back some of the same answers, but it really comes down to the measurables for me, right?
Got it.
So the first thing I do in the morning is jump on my phone, I check the numbers, right?
Wow.
What happened the day before, right?
Wow. Okay.
And that kind of tells you what your day is going to be like, right? Because ultimately it starts with the high level measurables, right? What was volume like the day before? What is our backlog looking like, right? And then once you start seeing red flags, it helps you begin to drill down across the organization as far as what's going wrong, right? And then that, I think, helps focus not just your attention, but your team's attention, right? So when you have a startup and you have limited resources and you're fighting against big guys, you have to focus on those most important things.
Got it.
And if you waste time by solving problems that maybe aren't so material or aren't so impactful, you'll pay for it down the road, right? True. And you'll have left something that's meaningful and addressed.
Correct.
So in this way, I try to make sure that we are focused, right? And I think that's the main role of the CEO or of the country head, right?
Correct.
Is to understand what are those most important things, act as that North Star for the business, and try to keep everything on rails, right? Ultimately, I think as the bigger the organization has gotten, I found that my role, in terms of direct involvement with operations, with the business, has diminished.
Correct, because you're now you're gonna go up into this hot air balloon, literally looking at a macroscopic view. I mean, but still numbers, right? But not involved in the trenches as much anymore. Yeah. Right.
When we used to have problems back in the day, when we were backlogged in year one, right? The solution was, okay, finance, HR, get up. We're all going downstairs. We're going to the warehouse.
Oh, wow.
And,
with you?
Yeah, and we're all going to start sorting parcels.
Shoot.
Right?
That's hustle itself right there.
So, I remember one of the things that we did early on was again, in this kind of fail fast but fail cheap kind of mentality, we were running through these different kind of logistics businesses we could do. We got into this mailer business with one client.
Got it.
And they weren't able to pass information digitally to us.
Oh, wow.
So we were sitting there manually encoding tens of thousands of envelopes, just to inject into our system and run this proof of concept. Right. And I remember sitting there until like 3, 4 a.m. typing in addresses until my eyes bled, right? But the turning point for me with this came, around Chinese New Year last year. I remember this very vividly. There was a big sale. Okay. We had scaled a lot that Christmas. Right. And then, we were in backlog, probably the worst backlog percentage we've ever been in the history of the business. And so my instinct was, okay, rally the troops, everybody get in your cars, we're driving down to the warehouse, and we're all going to sort parcels. Oh, wow. And, to the team's credit, a lot of people showed up, right? A lot of people showed up in their sports gear, and, we're sorting parcels for like 8 hours. Right. And, I remember being there at like 11 p.m. and looking back at me at the massive mountain of parcels, looking across at my team and how tired everybody was, and then realizing like, hey, this isn't how we solve problems anymore. Right.
The same strategy that worked in year one won't cut it in year 3.
Yeah. So sweat equity, doesn't always get it done, right? Okay. And ultimately, putting everybody in the best position to succeed is actually a much better use of my time and of my team's time, right? So, instead of having finance come down, can we insulate operations from certain issues that finance has been, popping up to them or something like that, or solve problems for them? Got it. Or can HR help with hiring or diagnosing where the bottlenecks are that cause this backlog, right? Can the sales team work with our clients to kind of cap volume in certain areas, right? So there was all these different levers that, I had to start thinking about to help the business succeed, that didn't involve, again, me getting in a car and delivering parcels or me going down and sorting parcels. Right. So, ultimately, I think that maturity of mentality is really important as you get bigger, but also understanding, when you're at that point. Okay. At some point, you have to pay your dues. Absolutely. Right? I think I was fortunate enough to meet Fred Levy, Fred from the
Cash.
Cash and the Gcash team now. Right. And it was one of my first experiences with meeting somebody on the ground after moving back. Right. And he was asking about the business, how things were going, and he was laughing at all these little anecdotes and stories and problems I was having. And one thing that really stuck with me that Fred told me was something he calls the toilet paper rule, which is as the CEO, if you don't think about putting toilet paper in the bathroom, nobody will. Yes. And really, it's funny, but at the same time, it really kind of captures a lot of that early experience, right? Which is that if you have to be very conscientious in thinking about the needs of your employees, thinking about the needs of the business overall. Right. And it's not just about, what your KPIs are, right? It's about everything else underlying. There's
also the intangibles.
Yeah, 100%.
That's a lot. Because at the end of the day, you can't just base it off of numbers. These are people. And you can't manage metrics the same way you manage people.
Totally.
Now that's my segue here. What's your management style like now in terms of managing these people? Are you a control freak, or are you like a ninja control freak? You don't really let them know. And that's why I told them my team. It's like, guys, I let you guys get away with a lot of shit. But don't think that I don't know. I know everything because I was a bad employee when I was in your shit. So I know the game before you even tried it.
Right.
But I let you get away with it because I trust you. And at the end of the day, you're going to do your shit. For you, how do you manage your team?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's not about, you can't be very prescriptive in this kind of business. Again, if you don't know what the end state is, or maybe you have an idea of the end state, but you don't know what the path is going to be, right? And part of this hiring approach of hiring for strong problem solvers, naturally you have to let them do their thing, right? You have to let them problem solve.
And let them fail too.
Right, and let them fail, because that's, again, how things happen.
Correct.
And I think as a manager, your job is more to try to keep the guardrails up so that the impact of that failure maybe is controlled or minimized, or at least they fully understand the repercussions of the certain decisions that are being made. But ultimately, I think the way that we like to manage people is to sort of prescribe an endpoint, right? This is where we're going, right? You need to get us here, right? And then the question is, what do you need to do to get us there, right? Or what do you need from us to get there?
Resources, support, and whatnot. Got it. All right. Now, I'll ask you a few hustle questions or hustle tips. Let's pay it forward to the listeners, because this is our season finale. We're going to be gone for a while, but not too long. But I want to make sure that whatever you listen to here is enough to cover for that time that we're not going to be around. All right. I want to know about your networking, or the way you network, right? You always have that good support system around you. What's your philosophy in how you network and make sure you maximize every opportunity that's available for you?
Yeah, I think I've been really fortunate based on the people that I've encountered throughout my career and sort of what these guys have gone on to do. It's allowed me to kind of also expand my network and connect with better people. But I think first and foremost, it starts with the work that you do, right? So people want to be connected with people that do good work. And ultimately, I think that's the thing that I found to be most enriching for myself personally, and most gratifying for myself personally, is having people come up to me and say, "Hey, wow, you're the Ninja Van guy. That's great. It's awesome. I'm so excited about what you guys are doing in the market." Right. And so for me, I think creating that reputation, the credibility around yourself is key, right? But also nurturing the relationships that you do have is also is extremely important. Right, because these are the guys that are going to go out and advocate for you. Got it. So, like you said, Brian was the guy who referred me for this podcast slot, right? And I think it's great that he's always been in my corner. I really appreciate having him at my back when these things come, and having guys like him and Paolo to ask advice from along the way has been really helpful for me as a young CEO.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of education, because you said you've come through marketing and whatnot, how do you now learn key things that will help? Because as a founder, as a CEO, or the leader, the captain of the ship, right, nobody has a playbook, right? And we're gonna fuck up a lot, right? For you, what's your MO when it comes to learning new things and how you implement them to your team?
So I think, first of all, especially on the team level, it starts with the kind of people that you bring to the organization, right? Got it. So we talked earlier about one of the things that we value as a business, which is problem-solving ability. Got it. I think another thing that we value would be really high EQ and self-awareness, right? Nobody likes working with somebody who thinks they know everything, right? And I think naturally people who think they know everything aren't good problem solvers, because they're very prescriptive in terms of the kind of solutions that they think they bring to the table, or the thing they need to bring to the table. Okay. So I think when you have that kind of high EQ base, it naturally lends you to also being a good learner, right? Of course. And someone who's very open to new ideas, new perspectives, right? Ultimately, empathy plays a big role in terms of good problem solving, right?
Putting yourself in another person's shoes.
Exactly. And most of the time, that's the customer. For us, we have two kinds of customers. We have the shippers and we have their customers, the consignees. So we have to kind of understand what their needs are and what their challenges are, so that we can we can improve the product every day, right? And for me, that's where most of my learning comes from, is in hearing feedback from my customers, no matter how painful it may be, right? My parcel was late. You missed my son's birthday. Things like this happen quite often, unfortunately. And it's something that we have to internalize and understand. The fact that we missed the birthday isn't the lesson, but why did we miss it, right? What happened along the way?
Cold, hard truth.
Yeah, and how can we improve, right?
Absolutely.
Because if everyone's blowing sunshine and rainbows up your butt, of course you're going to think we're so great, nothing needs to change. Let's keep doing everything. And then that's how you stagnate. That's how you fail.
Correct. And because your head grows as well at the same time.
For sure.
Okay, now last few questions. In terms of numbers and analytics, what's one metric that no matter if shit hits the fan, and I don't care what happens, there's the one metric that I care about more than anything, and why?
That's a good question. I think one of the big ones for us, and it's kind of a funny one, is called we call it CMI rate.
CMI. What's CMI?
It's a very casual term. It stands for cannot make it.
Ah.
So basically, this is one of those things that is kind of a backstop in terms of whether or not our technology is working, whether or not we have thinking about certain variables the right way.
Okay.
But essentially, the CMI rate helps us understand if we've overloaded a rider. Right. So if a rider can't complete his route in the day, meaning he can't make a quality attempt on every parcel that's in his pack, he'll have to CMI everything else. Right.
Shoot. Yeah.
So
that's it. This is where I stop.
Yeah. So the CMI rate helps us understand, again, if we've made the right decisions along the way. If the rider's too overloaded, it means we're overextending ourselves. Right. We need to either hire more, we need to slow down growth, or we need to add more stations. We need to reinforce the network somewhere. But basically, it's kind of one of those governing audit factors that we look at quite frequently.
That's awesome. And how do you measure that? Is there a certain metric that you look, or just really like, all right, if there's too many CMIs, then all right, then we're gonna have to see the effect of that down the road.
Well, it's not going to be it'll depend on the extent of the problem, right? If you're looking at like a massive network-wide CMI issue, that means you're massively overloaded.
Oh, shoot. Right.
You're massively overrouting everybody, which means there's too many parcels at each station, which means you're inbounding too much stuff. So it's a huge systemic problem. Right. But it can also be very directional.
Okay.
So it can help us identify which stations are overloaded or are underbuilt. It can help us identify riders that are underperforming or are lazy. Right. So if you are CMIing,
that's the people component of it, right? Yeah.
And if you're CMIing a lot of stuff at like 3 p.m, well, come on, guys, we have 6 more hours in the delivery day.
Correct.
Let's get back to work.
Absolutely.
Right. But if you're CMIing a ton of stuff at 11 p.m, it tells you something else. Right. So it's also context driven. There's a lot of information here that helps.
There's a lot of whys also that you need to ask when you see that CMI.
Yeah. And that's something that's also deeply empowered by the tech piece, right? Because it's impossible to manage this in real time with this richness of data that is described, unless everything is happening literally in real time, right? And through an app-based environment.
Okay, now last question, Martin, before we wrap this really amazing, I'm literally blown away with the amount of learnings. And I'm going to keep listening to this as I edit it down the road, or the next couple of days. But Martin, I'm curious, what's the best advice you've received, and from whom, and from what was the advice?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that really stuck with me was something that my dad told me as a kid, and this wasn't really managerial advice, but it became managerial advice like down the road.
Got it.
And it's something that I often tell my team, right? And that's I can't help if you don't tell me if you have a problem, right? So basically, he said if you tell me, it's our problem. If you don't, it's your problem.
Got it.
And I think as a manager, it's something that really stuck with me, right? Because especially at this level of organizational size and scale. I can't be on the ground with everybody. I can't be in touch with every problem anymore. And what frustrates me the most is when somebody needs my help, but they bury something because they're afraid of the repercussions. That looks
sugarcoat it.
Right. And so for me, it swings both ways, right? One is empowering your people to bring and surface those problems to you. But on the other side is creating an environment and being the kind of manager where people feel comfortable enough to
come clean.
Yeah, to come clean and open up, right? And let's not be afraid of failure, right? Let's not be afraid of screwing up. It's something. It's how we learn, right?
Got it.
So the other thing I always tell the team is don't make the same mistake twice, right?
Yes.
So it's okay to screw up, just never the same way twice.
Right. Fool me one time, shame on you.
That's right.
Fool me twice. All right, that's on you already. But all right, thank you very much, Martin. This was an amazing gold episode. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of learnings. But guys, thank you very much again for sticking out 37 episodes of something we've done since March 1. I didn't feel like 37 episodes. It was too quick. But we'll take a break from this point. But don't forget that we're going to be back. So for you guys that want to get first tips on what we're going to be doing next, please join us on the Hustle Share community on Facebook. Just look it up. And then also message us on m.me/hustleshare powered by ChatbotPH, because we're going to be giving you a lot of insider information when we're going to be back and what we're going to be doing. And guys, I'll see you guys in the next season. Peace.